Happy Monday. Wow, that music went from like some nice, like low key reggae to some kind of like hardcore stuff. It's really weird. I don't know how they come up with that playlist, but I can't complain. It's royalty free, it's not bad music. So, I hope you guys had a wonderful weekend. I did lots of sewing. The weather was kind of iffy this weekend. So I think we had one day of really nice weather and then some overcastness. And that's kind of what I'm dealing with today. I had to run some errands this morning and I was just like, ugh, it just looks like miserable outside. So still no AC though. So keep your fingers crossed because I'm trying to save money. And if I don't have to turn the AC on, makes a big difference. So, like I said, I sewed most of the weekend, so I didn't do a whole lot of research. I did, I guess one little update. I did do a little testing with an AI platform called Transcribus. And I only had a few minutes to play with it because I had to stop and do go on to something else, and I just didn't get back to it. But it is a transcription platform and I think you get like 50 free credits a month if you go with the free plan. So that's what I'm using right now. And it's supposed to have this really good optical character recognition for handwriting. And so my plan was to try transcribing some of the Dr. Dunton correspondence in my research pile. Transcribing that correspondence, I started doing it. I started like an organization system for the files, and it just takes so long to transcribe. Even when somebody's handwriting is pretty good, you still have that, like, you got to stop and read and then you type. And gosh, I don't know how people, we call them administrative assistants today, but secretaries, that those secretarial type of jobs where people were, taking dictation and transcribing. I don't know how they did it. I feel so lucky today to have automated and AI transcription systems, and a lot of them are pretty good. Voice to text is getting better and better and better. For instance, I use Adobe Premiere, which is the video editing app in the Adobe suite, and it has an AI transcription now that is really good, unless it's something like an oddball phrase or word that I guess is not, like, I don't know, in the top use in the English language, because I'm using English transcription. So anyway, it's pretty amazing that you can do that kind of stuff. Anyway, I don't know where I was going with that. Oh, transcribing handwriting. So anyway, I did a couple, and I think that I probably need to do a little bit of a tutorial with this platform because I don't think I did it right. I had dropped a file in there, just an image of a letter I'd taken a picture of. And I think the very first one I didn't set it as English. Apparently this is, I think, a German company, so like the default is German. And so I was like, what is wrong with this transcription? And I was like, oh, it's transcribing it in German when it is not German. And so I picked two very difficult letters to test with because the handwriting was like really bad. And I wasn't super impressed at first. So I want to try more, obviously. I need to give it a chance. And possibly use the proper sequence of steps of the workflow that I was supposed to, and hopefully that will improve the output. But hey, Robin, sure thing. So anyway, we'll see how that goes. I will report back. In research, in historical research, handwriting, it can be so, it's kind of like there could be some really important little tidbit of information that is in something handwritten, whether it's a letter or a diary. And people get paid a lot of money to transcribe that stuff, in the past. Transcription services, people made decent money. With machine learning now, I think that's kind of going to be a thing of the past, that machines are able to pick this up. But we'll see. So this Transcribus or Transcribus service, when you do the paid version, you get access to like better models, and I guess those models have been trained on different types of handwriting. So I think what they said was different models of handwriting since like the 15th century or something. So it's supposed to be able to read those, crazy like illuminated manuscripts or something. I don't know. So anyway, I'm hopeful, because I think that something like that can make, certainly hate to see people that do transcription be put out of a job, but typically AI can be more accurate in some cases, because it doesn't make judgment calls necessarily the way that humans do. And that's like the double-edged sword there. Sometimes human judgment call is exactly what's needed, and AI is missing that. Oh, yay. I'm so glad, Robin. Thank you for being here, by the way. I think, it must be like it's summer. Everybody's on vacation. Usually Monday is my big day. I was, while the commercial was playing, I was like, I wonder if anybody's joining me today. There was like literally nobody here. So anyway, although I can't always see into the community. So sometimes I think folks are here, and Twitch just doesn't let me see them. Anyway, yeah, AI doesn't have feelings. It doesn't have, there are interesting, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, there are interesting observations in the field of like psychometrics and AI, and how when you can take emotion out of things, AI is always better if you can take emotion out. But human beings often can make these these millisecond judgment calls that AI is not capable of. So anyway, it's interesting stuff. I see it as a real game changer if, this handwriting recognition OCR stuff can work well. So we'll find out. I'll report back. So today, I thought we would jump back into a Quilter's newsletter magazine. We haven't looked at one in a few weeks. And I thought I'd pull out June of 1995, 30 years ago. What's happened in 30 years ago this month in the world of quilting? So I have this lovely issue. You can see this pretty quilt that's on the front. And I'll turn on my overhead camera. I'm still looking for a decent overhead camera, and I'm kind of worrying that I need like the fancy something, like a webcam's not going to cut it. So we'll see. We'll also see how that goes. So I ditched the document camera a while back because it was just too small. Anyway, you don't want to hear about my technology woes. So we'll be looking at this. This quilt on the front is really pretty. But what I was going to say is this is from my mother's library. Recently I went to her house and I said, you're not looking at any of these Quilter's newsletter magazines. I'm going to steal them all. And I did. And she had definitely in the 90s, I think it was kind of spotty in the 80s when she would have a subscription and then she would let it lapse some years. But I think at least in the mid 90s, she pretty consistently had a subscription to Quilter's newsletter magazine. So I have many issues. So let's jump in. I don't have a whole lot of, I don't think I have much to tell you guys. Next week, I think we're going to have, is it next week or week after next? I got to look at the calendar. There's going to be some days and where I won't be here. Jill has communicated a calendar. So I should probably put that up. If I didn't already, I might have. Anyway, let's jump in. Okay. Here we go. Yeah, there we go. Let me fix this so you can see this. And then my messy desk. Okay. So here is this lovely quilt and can see there are cardinals, which is interesting because this is kind of a summery looking quilt, maybe a springy summery looking quilt, but they've included cardinals. And yeah, I don't know, cardinals always remind me of winter, although, you know, I guess that's a pop culture thing. I don't know. I mean, cardinals are around year round, right? In their habitats. So anyway, let's look at some of this. So this is interesting. This is C&T Publications, which those are great books for different techniques and things. I think they're still around. Martin Gale went out of business. That was another major quilt and handwork type of publication or publishing house. But I think C&T is still around. Anyway, the books that they have here, L.A. Sienkiewicz, Paper Cuts and Plenty, Volume 3 of Baltimore Beauties and Beyond. I have that book. L.A. Sienkiewicz was one of, she's still alive, although I think she's not in great health. But she is one of, like, the big Baltimore album quilt people. She studied and learned the techniques and taught the techniques in Baltimore album quilts. So she's kind of a big name. And then a Soft Edge Piecing, Jenny Beyer. There's another big name. Elegant Stitches, that is, oh gosh, what's her name? Judith Baker Montano. I have that book, actually. I bought that book back in the day, probably in 1995. So yeah, what were you guys doing in 1995? Some of our friends would say things like, oh, I was in middle school. Or, oh, I wasn't born yet. Oh, Robin says, okay, yeah, C&T is still in business and thriving. They celebrate their 40th anniversary in 2023 and are now owned by Caroline and Tom's sons. C&T Publishing is family run. You know what? I didn't realize that they were a family run business and that C&T met Caroline and Carolee and Tom. They have expanded into new areas of craft and offer online learning through Creative Spark. I have heard of Creative Spark. I didn't realize that was C&T. Well, that's awesome. You know, in this day and age when so many things are going out of business, you know, things that just been part of our lives for so long. And so it's good to see that C&T is still up and running. So 1995, I was ferrying kids back and forth to various schools and activities. Yeah, Robin. I was planning a wedding in the summer of 1995. And in fact, let's see, this is June. My husband to be, I can't remember exactly when he left. It was probably June. He went to Iceland on an internship for the Navy, and he was there all summer. And you know, Iceland, land of the midnight sun. So he's constantly sending me, or not constantly sending because we didn't have the internet or cell phones, but he was constantly taking pictures to show me you know, things that were happening, you know, and one was like the Navy had a fun run kind of thing. And, he's like, yeah, this is like in the middle of the night and it's sunny. Like it's just an afternoon. And I was like, okay, without somebody's watch, I can't tell that. So anyway, that's what I was doing in 95. I was in my last semester in college. It was really hot that summer. I lived in Virginia, and we had about 20 or 30 days straight of 90 to 100 degree weather. I lived in a 7th floor apartment in Richmond, Virginia with no air conditioning. And it was because my husband to be was out of the country. I'm there with our 2 cats, just going to school, going to work, and then just lying there when I was home because it was so hot. And guess what class I was taking? It was an elective. I actually had 2 I had to take. One was in the textile studio. The other one, in all my brilliance, I decided that it was an elective I had to take, and that I was going to take glass casting. Passed out on my first day of class because it was so hot. a glass studio is just like a giant furnace all day long. They have the kilns, which put out heat, even though, it's not exactly like a fireplace, but they have the blast furnace where you actually, like, where you blow glass. And that thing, they would have it going, when people were doing studio work, like going 24/7, I guess. So anyway, that was quite a memorable summer. So let's get back to the Quilters newsletter magazine. So let's see, the features here are quilt making around the world. Karen O'Dowd, I'm familiar with her name. Scrap quilt under the sea, peerless patchwork. Museums and quilts. So the tactile architecture at Decatur House by Carter Houck. That's another name we know. Old time quilting, precious quilt makers of the 19th century, Barbara Brackman. Let's see. Quilt Makers Workshop is Ellie Sienkiewicz. Yeah, so definitely names we know. So The Needle's Eye, of course, written by Bonnie Lehman. I have not looked through this issue, by the way, so I'm going to have to make like some decisions if I'm going to read it, what I'm going to read. So first of all, the quilt on the front, lovely, says, this is interesting. Okay, so on the cover, the quilt is called The Garden, 86 by 97, 1938, by Keturah Elizabeth Tooley. Quilt historian Roger Kirikoff said in a letter to Quilters Newsletter magazine, the family called it Redbirds, but it is one of the garden quilts inspired by Ruth Finley's 1929 book, Old Patchwork Quilts. Keturah Tooley's husband projected an image of the quilt and drew the pattern for her. She appliqued the top, and a Methodist church quilting group in San Francisco quilted it. By K.E.T. and 1938 appear in the quilting. And I'm trying to think. I think the Ruth Finley book I have, I don't think the one I have has this on it, but now that I'm thinking about it, is this quilt on like the cover of one of the editions? I'm not sure. I have to pull out my copy at some point and see if this is inside. Very interesting, but I mean, gosh, look, that's a really detailed, beautiful applique. I love applique. All right, moving right along. Oxmoor House, Quilts Made Easy. It is so easy to find these books and things and on Abe and such. I keep encouraging people, new friends and who are quilters or new quilters. I keep encouraging them, go look for stuff online from back in the day, because you've got some really good fundamental teaching that are in those publications. So what's new and news of quilting? So here's something interesting. Smithsonian exhibits White House craft collection. So this says the entire White House craft collection from the Year of American Craft, 1993, is being exhibited at the Smithsonian Institution's National Museum of American Art. The collection contains 3 quilts. Okay. One by Judy Dales is in this issue's photo finish. Adrian Rothschild and Ellen Kochansky made the other 2 quilts. After the exhibit, individual pieces may be displayed periodically at the White House until the end of the Clinton administration. And then it's expected to be transferred to the National Archives and Records Administration and eventually to the Clinton Presidential Library. Interesting. So here's something that I was recently, a few weeks ago, I was at the Baltimore Museum of Art doing some research and just having a conversation with the librarian archivist there. And she is, like, her area of specialty is in photography. So she doesn't know as much about textiles. So she and I often, we have conversations. I kind of teach her stuff about textiles, but she also has like some really interesting intel and information sometimes that she's told me that I just didn't know, just based on her experience in like photography and painting and that kind of stuff. And she told me, she was talking about, and this is something I just never thought about, like how this happens. But when presidents, when their time is over and they're leaving, and there's a new administration moving in, particularly when you've got a president that's at the end, like they've had 2 terms, they're done. Everything gets moved out usually, and there are these professional companies that get hired to do that, and they are specifically like, I guess, government, they have government clearance, like they're vetted, that they're not gonna, talk and release information. But they will move stuff to a presidential library, or they will move a presidential library. they do, I don't know how to, like, I guess they're just like a professional moving company, but they specialize in big collections. So museums and libraries, university archives, that kind of thing. And at least this one that she was telling me about, they did presidential stuff. And it was so interesting to think, like, I don't know what I thought. I knew that, like, when the Clintons left office, or, George Clinton, Bill Clinton, when he left office, I knew that, like, he and Hillary didn't, like, back up to the White House in a U-Haul, but it never occurred to me that there are a lot of things. So it's not just like moving a household. It's like a lot of stuff that would go into a presidential library or other archives or whatever. And apparently, like, I guess some presidents leave stuff behind. And this company that she was telling me about that she had worked with for the library archive move, they were moving stuff out from, I think, Roosevelt administrations, like, far forward into the 20th century, like into the later 20th century. So I thought that was interesting. There were just things that I guess had been put in storage and never moved out. So anyway, long story short, there are specialty companies that do that stuff. This is a pretty quilt. This says Tropical Treasure. Looks like those pretty tropical flowers and leaves and things. 82 by 94 by Sherry Sunday of New Kingstown, Pennsylvania. And it said it was the first place winner in the traditional category at the 95 Mid-Atlantic Quilt Festival in Williamsburg. I know my mom used to go to that, and at the time I couldn't have cared less. Let's see. Oh, we've got the Grace Company. They're still around. Quilt frames. Body Right, the posture pleaser. I've seen this. This is like it sort of almost reminds me of like a weight belt, or the kind of thing that I don't know, they make you wear if you work on the dock in the back room of a grocery store or a store. But it's got this weight right here that presses into your lower back, and it's like, I think, supposed to like push your posture. Yeah, back brace. Yeah, push your posture a certain way, because people are used to hunching over. This is probably a thing that tech workers could definitely use today. Designs for continuous line quilting. Interesting. Look at all of these best-selling small quilt projects. So we've got a little duffel bag thing that opens up into a play mat. That's pretty cute, like to put a baby in, and it looks like it's got little scallops, like it's a what do you call it, like I don't know, like a little pool, a little wave pool. Oh, look at that thimble, it's a whale. Unique log cabin. Oh, I see. So they're log cabin blocks that are manipulated to look like a heart. Yeah, this is very 90s. Very 90s stuff. I think the 90s is when you have a lot of hand-dyed fabric. You have batiks, I think, are starting to become a thing. Yeah, so lots. This is Bubat's Sizzle, 45 by 50 by Karen Sank of Golden, Colorado. Oh, I'm sorry, Colden, New York. I almost thought it was Golden, Colorado. That's an interesting looking quilt. Yeah. Judith Baker Montano, as I said. Her book, Elegant Stitches, I think was very, very popular, but it was like silk ribbon embroidery. That was like, that time was another big explosion for crazy quilting. And this era, and I'm not like blaming Judith Baker Montano, but this era of that crazy quilt, people going crazy over crazy quilts again. I think it's this era that gave people the idea that crazy quilts are super valuable. Because even today, you'll still get people that as soon as they see a crazy quilt, they're like, oh, that's an antique, and that's worth a lot of money, and I'm going to be able to sell this. And it's like, no. Crazy quilts were like I don't know, maybe not necessarily the polar fleece rag blanket of the 19th century, but kind of close. Some of them are really beautiful, very fine. Others are not worth the fabric that they are stitched from. So, but I think this era and this kind of romanticization of the Victorian era with like all of the lace and the ribbon embroidery and all that stuff really gave people this idea that all of those things were so valuable and exciting. And lots of people were doing crazy quilty things. Is it all just more ads? Oh, what is this? Solstice. By Barbara Barber of Andover. Was the first place winner in the geometric division at the 1994 National Patchworks Championships in England. Interesting. It's 101 by 101, so that's a big quilt. That's like kind of pushing king size. So, but that's a very pretty quilt. Those, I don't know how well this is showing up, but it doesn't look like it's showing up very well. But these are very, very narrow, tiny points. So this is almost like it's almost feathered. Wow. Michael James Studio Quilts. This, I'm guessing, this is I can't keep this in the frame. This looks to be, this is his exhibition. These are his exhibition quilts. So, Whetstone Hill Publications, Swansea, Massachusetts. So he was in Massachusetts at the time. So I guess it was a local company that they used to for his exhibition. Quilts, Artistic Expressions. Okay, this is the 5th International Quilt Exhibition and Contest sponsored by Quilter's Newsletter Magazine. More than $5,500 in prizes. This is interesting. The theme of the 5th contest, Quilts, Artistic Expressions, may be interpreted as you wish following the guidelines in one of these 3 theme variations. How would Renoir, Kandinsky, Bearden, Michelangelo, Van Gogh, Dali, Cassatt, Turner, Chagall, Hiroshige, Rivera, O'Keeffe, Brock, Ernst, Warhol, Seurat, Pollock, Rembrandt, Rockwell, Mondrian. Okay, let's keep naming famous artists. Or any other renowned artist express his or her vision with needle, thread, and cloth in a quilt. If your favorite decorative artist or painter had made a quilt, how do you imagine it might look? Make a quilt in your own creative interpretation of the style or palette of your favorite artist, and tell us what it is about the artist's work that inspired you. Another theme variation is choose the color palette of one of the master artists in your country or another country if you wish, and express your own ideas in a quilt through that palette, or use those colors to reinterpret a traditional quilt design. Describe how that artist's palette and or work influenced your design. And finally, the third option is you are the quilt artist. Create your own artistic expression with your own chosen palette in an original quilt. Make an artist statement that expresses what you wanted to say through your quilt. So basically, this contest is make a quilt. Make a quilt any way you want. That's pretty funny. Let's see. Quilts reaching the finals will be exhibited at the American International Quilt Association's Quilt Expo 5 in Lyon, France. And that was in 1996. And the 22nd International Quilt Festival in Houston. Houston. Oh, yes. Oh boy, there's all the rules. It's clearly the 90s. We've got lots of rules. Many, many, many rules. I can't think of any of those like newspaper contests, all that kind of stuff. You didn't have a full page of official rules back then. Let's see. These are the calendar. Man, there was a lot of stuff happening in the 90s with quilting. Look at that. Just columns and columns of things. That's a pretty cool quilt. Look at that. This is just an ad for P&B Textiles, but what a neat quilt. Sort of Baltimore album inspired in the center medallion, and then it's kind of, it's birds and oh, you know what? It's because it's probably because somebody made it, or it's Ellie Sienkiewicz. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Melon Vignette by Julie Prose. Okay. So my guess is, though, this is made based on some teaching of Ellie Sienkiewicz. Very cute. I like it. Ooh, Under the Sea. These are cute fish. Look at them. This is designed and made by Joyce T. Lund of Santa Cruz, California. I like how they're showing this on graph paper, so you can kind of see like where you've got your half square triangles. I think it's easier to kind of imagine that. We're still working with templates though. We haven't started doing that that sort of flip and turn thing, and you know what I mean, as far as I'm particularly talking about this one right here. Get up close. So this long one here, it looks like what they're suggesting is that you have to cut out this rectangular piece and then this triangular piece. But nowadays, and I'm thinking particularly because I've pieced a lot of her quilts, is Elizabeth Hartman. She teaches, you know, you cut, that's a square and a rectangle, and then when you put them on top of each other and you sew that seam, and then you trim and flip the square out, what's left of the square, both of them you end up trimming like this. So it's kind of funny. I guess that really was a much later 20th century or early 21st century techniques that I mean, not to say that people weren't already doing that at this time, but yeah, seems like they weren't. Oh, look at this. Oh, you guys, those are very intricate. That little thing right there, there's a bunch of piecing in that. So this is, oh, okay. This is Adriana Kunin Dutilla. And the name of this quilt is Bloedkorreln Bijou, which means jewel made of red coral, which we call blood coral. So she must be Dutch, I'm guessing. Yes, she's from the Netherlands. It's a very pretty quilt. Oh, and here's how, yeah, okay, so you can see these are those pieced bits. That's how that's made. Ah, yeah, you can see there. Oh, okay. It's a little, like the way this stuff comes together is then how you insert these pieces here. It's a little not clear how it comes together until you look at the pieces. I like that. I like quilts where you really have to like look in there and see like how. Okay, Museums and Quilts by Carter Houck. I'm don't know. It seems like an interesting one that might be worth reading. Let's flip forward a little bit more. Maybe we'll come back and read this article. This quilt, let's see. Who Are These Children Dressed in Red? 47 by 60 inches by Judith Traeger of Boulder, Colorado. The title is from Walter Robinson's song, Harriet Tubman, and refers to the Underground Railroad. Okay. Sorry for the glare, you guys. No, my wish list right now is ring lights. And I have some lights that I travel with that I might permanently install because I think they're better than my overhead light, and the video won't get the glare, right? Okay. Oh, look at all these. These are interesting. Very dark palettes. I'm not recognizing any of the names I'm seeing here. Oh gosh, look at that. It's very ethereal looking, I guess. The otherworldly. Devil's Claw from the collection of Bernice McCoy Stone. That's a fun looking quilt. Look at that. They're kind of all dark, and then you've got this one that's sort of brighter colors, and then you've got another one over there too. It looks like there probably is some fabric changing colors in there, but oh, what a fun looking quilt. And it looks like I think it's more complicated than it looks, but it's a good deal piecing. You've got some what do we call these? Economy blocks, or square and a square. You got some flying geese pieces. And then the rest is just squares and rectangles. Huh. Okay. This is the Reader's Quilt Show featuring Judy B. Dales. Oh, I like this one. The stars one. That looks like, I think there's some batiks in there, but I think there's a lot of it because it's different colors of florals. I think there's it's probably not Cave Facet at this point in time, but it looks like a Cave Facet flower. This is another cool one. Look at that. It's got that sort of, I don't know. You always see that curl, that Fibonacci curl. That's kind of what that reminds me of. Oh, but gosh, look at that. This perfect stars. And then look at the piecing in that. That's really amazing. It looks like she also did some, what I'm guessing is applique. Does it say? No, but it does say she overlaps transparent chiffons. So I guess kind of like I was talking to you guys the other day about my tulle technique. Tulle versus TOOL is what I mean. Oh, look at this. These boats, sailboats. Famous people blocks. Okay, this says our recent famous people contest generated memorable block designs to honor well-known persons, both real and fictional. So, oh my gosh, this, wow, okay. This says Ribbons for Polly. I don't know if you guys remember Polly Class. It says, I designed this block for Polly Class because it saddens me to think that she will never have a chance to be famous for her accomplishments. She is famous now only because she was the victim of a heinous crime. When she was kidnapped, her friends displayed purple ribbons as a remembrance and reminder of her disappearance. If I remember correctly, her disappearance, and I think, I'm trying to remember, I don't think they have ever found her remains, to my knowledge, but I do believe that they solved her disappearance. He was a fellow, I don't know if he was a fellow classmate or if he was a campus security. But oh, what a terrible story. And gosh, I mean, her disappearance happened, well, this is 95. Her disappearance happened at least 30 years ago. And it was just within the last couple of years, I think, that they found the guy. Oh, that's a pretty block. Ah, and some information on freezer paper applique. Huh, okay, so this whole center is appliqued, and then you've got the piecing around. This is called Bonnie's block, designed for Bonnie Lehman. Well, that's a way to to try and butter up the I don't know. I doubt Bonnie Lehman was a judge for this, or she might have been. But yes, to butter somebody up. Okay, so this is a Barbara Brackman article. See, the child who looks to be about 5 or 6 is learning to master the needle and thread in this photo, which shows many kinds of Victorian needlework, including a doll quilt. A photo courtesy of Jonathan Holstein. So January 25th, 1885, Tennessee. Now I am piecing me a quilt. I have 12 stars done. Nearly all of the pieces were scraps that neighbor girls have given me. Letter from 6-year-old Maggie Blair. You know, Jill and I always have this joke that little girls must have been born clutching a needle and thread back in the day. Because, I mean, a 6-year-old writing a letter, I mean, letter writing was something that I know Gen X here. Letter writing was definitely something we were taught in elementary school. I don't remember first grade, though. I remember letter writing being more of like a second or third grade thing. So a 6-year-old child who can not only write a letter about her quilt that she's working on, but the fact that she already has 12 stars done. I mean, precocious indeed. This says, this is the kind of patchwork that unbelievably tiny hands used to work at when our grandmothers learned to sew and acquire patience at the same time. Perhaps the rising generation may be benefited by imitating grandmother a bit. Elizabeth May Blondell in McCall's magazine, January 1919. So, I mean, I'm guessing now, early 20th century, it was already starting to decline, the numbers of small children. Which, you know, you can't necessarily complain that much, because you think the small children had these skills because they were working hard. Their little hands were perfect for reaching into dangerous machinery in the factories. I mean, I'm laughing and jesting, but it kind of was true. You know, at the late 19th century, early 20th century, and you've still got the industrial, there's the early industrial revolution stuff going on with factories, and yeah, it was so not good for little children. And if you remember, Sarah Josepha Hale, was one of the people that advocated to get the children out of factories and into school. So we've learned much about that. So this says, a stereopticon photos were usually posed, and this one records a tiny quilting party, an event the photographer might have staged. So that one looks pretty cute. Little girls having a little sewing party. Let's see, this one says, 1898 stereopticon photograph shows a little girl hard at work at her daily stint of patchwork amid some marvelous late Victorian clutter. Her quilt is not quite a crazy quilt. It seems to be a pattern of rectangles. Yeah, so you can see all this Victorian junk back there. And, like, look at her little, I don't know if that's a big collar or some type of, like, thing laid over. Look at her little fancy little button-up shoes. Something interesting, when I was in Temecula, one of the lecturers was Lena DeMarco. She, talked about girls, young girls and making quilts. And I think the interesting thing she says, a lot of times young girls' quilts may not have ever been quilted, or if they were, it was very, basic quilting or tied, they tied their quilts, because the goal was not teaching young girls how to make quilts, but teaching young girls how to sew. And by virtue of being able to sew, then you can make a quilt. But the patchwork quilt, just something little, for instance, for their dolls, or maybe even for a younger sibling, a blanket or something for a younger sibling, was what their project was. So I never really thought about it that way, when you're looking at, and of course the little girls that are making these incredible like cross stitch and embroidered samplers and stuff. Yeah, it was, they were doing this amazing work, but it was part of their training. It wasn't just, a 6-year-old going, "Hey Ma, I think I want to make a quilt." It was a 6-year-old who was being taught needle and thimble skills, and, maybe got to choose her project, was given scrap fabrics or collected scrap fabrics on her own. But it was about learning how to sew, and, they were put to doing that constantly. Women, the load of sewing that women had to do until ready-made things became available in the stores, like ready-made clothing. Women had a lot of sewing to do. So this is interesting. This is Pattern Drafting 101, 8-Point Stars by Marie Shirer and Catherine Wright. So this is kind of cool. This is giving you the details for how to draft these. And so you would be able to draft these at any size you wanted with these instructions. Yeah, they're showing how you can, you can keep getting more detailed here, creating, more divisions. Fascinating. There's a book, I actually think I mentioned this recently. Ginny Beyer published a book. I think it's over in my bookshelf over in the corner. But it wasn't a quilting book. It was about making these fabric balls, like kind of like children's toys. But she showed like breaking them down into all of these different kinds of patchwork designs. And, there's your basic, like a baseball, which is 2 like apple core shapes that lock together. And then there's like the soccer ball, which is the pentagon shape, and make those. And then there's, I don't know, a couple of other shapes like hexagon and whatnot that, they get more and more detailed with these different shapes. And she shows these kind of steps of how to draft all of those shapes to any size you want. That is a skill. That is something that was definitely lost on me in math and school. And, I think, in terms of like advanced geometry, this is some really good stuff to know. I may have to come back to this and like work through, do a little project. The Meetin' Place. Bobby Quinlan introduces Keith Domer of Mesa, Arizona. So Keith Dahmer, at his Bernina 900 sewing machine with Carnival on the wall behind him. Oh, that's pretty. You can't see much of it, but behind him. Carnival was inspired by one of Mary Hickey's designs. So this is called Weaver Malaria. Okay. I really like that sort of ombre effect that he's able to get. And this is, to me, again, looking at this, very 90s. Very, very 90s. I think I said this the other day. We looked at some quilts. I was like, do not love the 90s color palettes. But I really like this technique. And like when you're backing up away from it, it is all block. It's all just single blocks, or just single pieces. But when you back away from it is when you get that amazing, like 3-dimensional, looks like it's woven. It's got the highlights in it. Very technically pleasing. This was called Zachary's quilt for his first nephew. And yeah, look at that fabric. So very 90s. Cinderella. It says quick and easy. So, oh yeah, it's showing the how to do a fast version. We got the rotary cutter. I guess we're probably 10 plus years into rotary cutters. And so I wonder, I have to look back, like when do we go from, showing pictures and steps with scissors, and when do we switch over to a rotary cutter? Be interesting to look and see. Here's Ellie Sienkiewicz. And it says of Washington, D.C. I think she lived in like Silver Spring or maybe Bethesda, somewhere down in southern Maryland. But it's this area that a lot of times people who live down there just say they live in D.C. because it's kind of DC-ish. So this is using fusible applique. So she is showing a technique I do not love, which is to draw on the fusible, iron it down, and then cut it out. The problem is you get this big, huge hunk of fusible, and when you go to press it down, it's really stiff. So the way that you should do it, or at least the way I do it, and I think it's the way you should do it, is if you have these large pieces, is you trace it, but then you cut on the inside, you cut all of it out, so you literally are only ironing like a frame into the fabric, onto the fabric, and then you cut around that, and then when you fuse it down, it's just that little frame that's got glue. Oh, look at this. This is a beautiful, beautiful picture. So this is ribbon work basket for broderie purse blooms. So it looks like she's got, I can't tell, let's see. Designed by Ellie Sienkiewicz. Blanket stitched by Ellie and Yvonne Van Nida. The same chintz print was chosen and fused for the basket and the blanket stitched blooms. The pattern and directions may be found in Ellie's book. Okay. But you can see here, she's put like a chintz fabric behind the basket. And I can't tell. This looks like it might all be ribbons. All of the little parts of the basket. Looks like it might be twisted ribbons that she's stitched down. Very pretty. And broderie purse, I'm actually working on some broderie purse right now. Makes a big difference when you've got a lot of applique to do. It's still really, really time and effort involved, but it is a lot easier than trying to create a flower out of like all of these itty bitty little pieces. You can just put a flower already down, something that's already a flower. Loose Threads by Helen Kelly. So this must be one of the kind of I think Theo, oh gosh, I can't remember her last name. She was one of the other columnists that always had like the human interest quilting story. Oh boy, Quilt Lovers Forum. I want my daughter to love quilts. Good luck. My mother could be the one saying that when I was this age, and during this year, and I did come around. Oh my goodness, look at this. Baltimore album, 110 by 110. That's a big quilt by Frances Benton. So I'm assuming this is a new quilt. Yeah. Yep. It appears to be made in 92 and 93. It took me 8 months to applique. I believe it. There's so much in all of those. Look at that. Gorgeous. I guess, because Ellie Sienkiewicz was really active and popular around this time, I'm guessing this was a sort of, I'm thinking that the 90s were probably also a big time for Baltimore album quilts. Kind of dovetails with the crazy quilts. Crazy quilts are later, like 40 or 40 years later than Baltimore album quilts. So There's a lot of ads in the 90s. I feel like we've looked at a lot of pages of ads and less pages of content. So that's interesting. But gosh, look at all of these quilt shops. I'm wondering if any of these are still open. I'm not seeing any that I necessarily recognize. But then again, my travels to quilt shops has not been too terribly extensive. Expensive, yes. My trips to quilt shops have been expensive. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything that looks familiar to me. Yeah, a lot of these are in states that, yeah, oh gosh, a lot in Texas. Wow. Okay. The Pacific International Quilt Festival. Now that's one I had not heard of. Let's see. A World of Fabric. Over $11,000 in cash and prizes. Founding sponsors: Bernina, Fairfield, Quilter's Newsletter, Benartex. Okay. Oh, look at the instructors. Let's see. We've got Georgia Bone Steel. And look at their here for names there. Mary Mashuda, Marsha McCloskey, Jean Ray Laurie, Roberta Horton. Some of these names I don't recognize, but doesn't mean they're not like famous. Looks like there's a number of Japanese quilters. Sumiko Mine, Yuko Watanabe, Yazuko Yoshiura, Kumiko Sudo. Oh, I have books by her. So this is also a period when Japanese quilting is a big deal. I think you've got a lot of like cross-cultural stuff. Japanese quilters, coming here and learning about quilting. Some of the famous teachers going over to Japan and working with Japanese quilters. So quilts and other comforts, Golden, Colorado. Now, Quilter's Newsletter magazine was out of Colorado, so I'm wondering if this is, I don't know if they're still doing their, yeah, so, okay, so I think Quilts and Other Comforts is them, right? Am I wrong about that, you guys? Quilts and Other Comforts is, yeah, it's Bonnie Lehman. Pretty sure. Okay. More ads. Oh, here's an interesting book that I have not seen, I don't think. Quilt Restoration, A Practical Guide by Camille Dalphon Cognac. Or maybe I have seen that. Are you guys familiar with that? Quilt Restoration, A Practical Guide? The Classic American Quilt Collection, Baskets, edited by Mary V. Green and Karen Costello-Soltis. Gosh, lots of ads. I guess at this time, people were definitely wanting to buy things, This is like the heyday of quilt gadgetry. So, I guess they had a lot of people advertising, but, it's kind of, it's kind of at the, I guess this is kind of what I would see in quilt magazines today. You've got a lot of ads and not as much content as you want. That's why, I'm not here to shill because I'm not sponsored by anybody, but, and of course, Quilter's Newsletter magazine is no longer in print, so I don't, hopefully not being offensive. Bonnie Lehman is no longer with us. But Quilt Folk has no advertising in it. And so that's why it's expensive. It is an expensive publication to purchase and to subscribe to, but you get all the beautiful pictures and all of the articles and interviews with none of the ads. So, it's kind of I guess it's a toss up. Do you want a inexpensive magazine that's got some cool stuff in it, but it's got a ton of ads? Or do you want a more expensive thing that's more like an heirloom item? This is a fun schoolhouse. I love a schoolhouse quilt. So this says Vermont Schoolhouse, 90 by 90, pieced by Helen Young Frost of Tucson, Arizona, and quilted by Anne Ferrero of Georgia, Vermont. It was commissioned by the Vermont Quilt Festival as a fundraiser. Hobbs Heirloom Premium Wool. I love this batting. I'm a big fan of wool batting, and Hobbs is a good brand. All right. The Armchair Shopping Center. What do we have in here? It's really funny. In the earlier issues of Quilter's Newsletter magazine, you would always see ads by a woman named Barbara Bannister. And Barbara Bannister, the books that she's most famous for, there's 2 state capital quilt books, and I have both of them. And I can't remember. One of them is like more of a history book, and one of them is more of a pattern book. This is terrible. I haven't looked at them in so long, I don't remember. But she would have ads in this little merchant mall thing every single issue. And I can't remember. I think it was really for patterns. And, at one time she might have been part of like one of the round robin sort of things, but I think she eventually, became a pattern designer. Well, the reason, and I'm kind of going long-winded here about Barbara Bannister, is the other night I grabbed my Florence Pito book, her Historic Quilts book, the first one she wrote, which we have read here. And I opened it, I was looking for something, and I noticed, and I think I had noticed it before, but it just had never like crossed my mind really. There's a little gold return address, little gold sticker. If you've never noticed this or done this before, a lot of people in their books, like their quilt books or any kind of needlework books, would put their return address labels in there so that if they lent the book out, it would come back to them. Well, the sticker that was in there, owned by Barbara Bannister. So I have Barbara Bannister's Florence Pito book. And I thought that was so cool. I was like, oh my God, Barbara Bannister. Like, I know who she is. Like, I know her name. And I can't remember. I know she is no longer with us, but I can't remember when she passed away, if I saw a date or not. I think it's been a while. But she was very, very active in this community. And did writing. So, Quilters Hall of Fame celebration, Marion, Indiana. Amish Traditions Tour. Let's see what that says. So this is Lang's Great Escapes, which was a company, or is, I'm thinking probably was, a company in Burlingame, California. Quilters come dine with the Amish. Imagine yourself sharing a meal with an Amish family. Or riding in a horse-drawn buggy past peaceful farms. Imagine the tranquility of roads that go back in time through rolling hills set in the serene countryside of the Pennsylvania Dutch. Don't just imagine, experience the Amish way of life by joining the Amish Traditions Tour. Now, past peaceful farms, tranquility of roads. I can tell you, if you have never come to the East Coast and gone to Amish country, it is not peaceful. The amount of tourism through those areas, and I mean, they're small country roads. Stuff is kind of grown up around the farms. Obviously, the Amish are not doing any like commercial expansion, but a lot of other stuff there is, and so, well, it's not like a metropolis or anything. It's still like very crowded with tourists, depending on the season. So, let's see. The 5-day journey includes visits to homes of Amish quilters and handicrafters. Dinner in an Amish home. This is wild. I wonder how they were coordinating this. I will have to ask some of my friends who are from Pennsylvania and kind of know more about this stuff. Because I can't imagine today, and I'm not saying that the Amish are like, no, you cannot come to our home. In fact, from some of the things I've read, they are actually, or at least historically, were very welcoming. Like, they're very like helping hand kind of, welcoming people. And, certainly I've read books and accounts of people that, had Amish friends and were regularly invited to their homes. But today, I can't imagine the Amish being like, sure. I could be wrong. This kind of stuff may still be going on. Somehow I doubt it. So anyway, dinner in an Amish home, tours of Valley Forge, Longwood Gardens, and historic Philadelphia, and more. Okay, so this was quite a tour. Because Philadelphia it's a little ways away, maybe an hour or so. Prices start as low as $565 a person. Tours are offered weekly, March through November, great for single, group, and senior guests, and can accommodate fundraising activities. Very interesting. Be interesting to see how they handled visitors. Yeah, I would definitely be interested too. Now, what I do know, as far as an historical account of somebody who was of the modern world yet maintained close ties with the Amish, was a woman named Anne Hark, and her father was a Moravian minister, so she kind of was sort of culturally in that Pennsylvania Dutch kind of culture, by virtue of her family, but she traveled extensively throughout, eastern Pennsylvania, southeastern Pennsylvania, and she became friends with some Amish people, and was invited to events and ceremonial type stuff that and cultural events that kind of are closed to outsiders. So, again, like I said, they just like any nice people, you get to be friendly with somebody, and they certainly will invite, people in. But I can't imagine like a tour group, I don't know. I just feel like, the Amish are very good business people. And they kind of had to be, because they don't operate within, the economy as we do. So, to preserve their way of life, they do have to be good business people. But yeah, it definitely seems strange. So I'll have to inquire about that to see what it was like. Okay. Oh, look, bulletin board. Art references for quilts, artistic expressions. Most bookstores and libraries have art encyclopedias and other references featuring or picturing the works of major artists. So I guess this is telling you, if you're going to enter that contest, this is where to find Renoir and Van Gogh and Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci and Mary Surratt and Marc Chagall. It was like they did not leave an artist out from any major period. All right. Look at this. This is interesting. Judy B. Dale's Spirit Flight. So this is 53 by 73. Spirit Flight. Oh, it's to address the duality of death. Okay, Judy was on some topics here. What were her other quilts? It's here in the beginning. Did we? Okay, so her stuff is more like. Oh, you know what? I missed this. So this one, right here. Star Drift, 1993, 53 inches by 38 inches. It's the third in a series of quilts using the geometric figure known as the Lute of Pythagoras, which consists of the series of graduated and interlocking 5-point stars. The stars appear to drift downward in a relaxed manner, but are still strong and logically interconnected. So we're definitely got a situation here where she was using... Oh, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, this here. She was using mathematical stuff. And then this one doesn't say. So, painting design on a Costa Rican ox cart wheel. I still think this is based on the gold mean. Maybe I'm wrong, but what do I know? So, So even though this quilt deals with the subject of death, its message is one of hope. The spirit figure floating above the magical starry heaven. I don't know. Is that this? Maybe? I'm not sure. Represents the flight of the human spirit into the unknown after its passage through death. Well, it certainly is a really pretty quilt. All right. Well, that is that. I still think Quilter's Newsletter magazine was an amazing magazine. I think this was an amazing issue. However, I think you see, since I have shown other Quilter's Newsletter magazine issues here on the show, you can see this progression into magazines, crafting magazines being a lot of ads. And I think as the magazine gets thicker, it's not thicker with content, it's thicker with ads. So, not complaining. I mean, this is just the way magazines were back in the day. And I guess to some degree, the ones that are still around are the same way. So, okay. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that one. Now it is time. I think we're going to finish it today. I think we can. And you guys, I have not found the next book. I was looking, I kind of thought about Avril Colby, her patchwork book. And then I took that off my list because I was kind of like, oh, Avril Colby's quilting book was kind of a little boring. I'm not sure yet. I'm going to have to find something. I can get by without a book to read for a little while, but this is what I do here. So, we are reading from Hoopskirts to, I'm going to say it, Nudity by Carrie Hall, published in 1938. And we are on the last chapter, which is chapter 10, The Eternal Feminine. And I feel like this is the point where she has said all of these like crazy things, or not crazy things, but she clearly doesn't like innovative fashion. She doesn't like crazy hats and weird hairstyles. She doesn't like short skirts. Bathing costumes, forget about it. Evening gowns and nightgowns that are interchangeable, she's not a big fan. But I do see it's kind of interesting where she now in this chapter is sort of taking umbrage with men's opinions. It's kind of like, okay, is it preferable to have men judge women or other women judge women? Well, neither is preferable, but all right. So where we left off here, it's this very long quote by this man, and I'm going to reread it. Let's see if we remember who he is. I think this is, she says, Burton in his Anatomy of Melancholy. I think this is all consistently his quote. Yeah. So he says, let me remind you of woman's way, not so very long ago, of wearing street dresses with trains, rather long trains, and to her predilection of décolleté and short-sleeved waists or skirts or blouses during cold winter months, and more especially still of her possibly even less sensible trick of going about in fur neck pieces and fur-trimmed frocks when the mercury is going up and up like an aviator trying to break a world's record. So basically he's saying she bears her arms and her chest and her neck area in a winter, and she wears fur in the summer, which is really a complete lie. So this is what Carrie responds. There was no chances of rebutting the proof which this man has adduced. Woman does stand convicted, apparently beyond the possibility of a reversal of judgment, of aggravated inconsistency by the human experience of all the centuries known to history. But this man, like many others, still hopes that women may not be quite incurably inconsistent. For he goes on to say, since you are the ornamental part of the ornamental sex, and since harmony and appropriateness is unquestionably the very soul of true ornamentality, suppose you adopt and observe the fashion of dressing in harmony with nature's color scheme with due respect to the season. This is a man, no doubt, that would probably love Dressing Your Color, that came out in the 80s, and I can't remember what that was called. Do you guys remember? I remember my mom having a book about it, and it was like how you figure out if you're a spring, summer, fall, or winter, and etc. I'm certain this man would have loved that. He further assures us that the result will be fourfold. First, the result of greatly pleasing mere man who delights in beholding woman at her finest. Second, the result of benefiting herself mentally and morally, because of the law of psychology, whereby harmoniously becoming and glad attire makes the wearer happier and better. Oh, Robbie, you don't remember what it was called, but your mom and your aunt swearing by it. Yeah, what was it called? It was like, oh, it was funny. My last corporate job, I worked with a couple of very young people that were younger than my son at the time. And the one girl was very into fashion, and she had discovered that system and just thought it was so cool. And I was like, honey, let me take you back to the 80s when it most certainly was not cool. See, third, the result of being in the picture, really and integrally in it. And fourth and last, the greatest, the result of setting aside through such really reasonable recognition of nature and harmony, the verdict of inconsistency rendered against her sex. Color me beautiful. Thank you. God bless Robin and her Google abilities. Yeah. Color me beautiful. Yep. These mere men often ask such futile questions concerning the why of this or that particular part of women's dress. During the period when women's waists were fastened up the back, one young Benedict wanted to know why they make these newfangled cobweb shirtwaists that women wear buttoned in the back. Well, why indeed? His friend, another mere man, could only answer, there isn't anything logical in women's fashions. A shirtwaist being an imitation of a man's shirt, you would reasonably expect it to fasten down the front. But being a woman's garment, and therefore the very antithesis of reason, it fastens down the back. This man needs a slap. He further asserted, now suppose our shirts were fastened down the back with hooks and eyes. What would be that situation? Why, we wouldn't stand for it, not for a minute. Nobody would hire men to wear shirts built that way, no matter if Harry Lehr, L-E-H-R, I don't know who he is, Harry Lehr himself dressed in the proper caper. Any attempt to portray the idiosyncrasies of fashion would be incomplete and decidedly unbalanced unless all the follies and foibles were given due recognition. And these apply to men's as well as women's clothes. The time is not so long past when, measured by the fact that fashions originated at the time of the exit from the Garden of Eden, when men clothed themselves with all the splendor of the pheasant cock, with their satins and laces, their rings and earrings, their chains and charms. In the last 100 years, they have seen the error of their manner of dressing, and at the close of the 19th century, their clothing was subdued and quite in keeping with the dignity of their position as arbiters of the world affairs. Their position as arbiters of world affairs had given them, but still subject to the whims of manufacturers and tailors. But what of the time of Beau Brummel? For instance, when every dandy in England hastened to learn, mark, and inwardly digest whatever delicate last touches had been added to all the delightful former touches of that master of modes for men, Beau Brummel. Beau Brummel, famously of the Billy Joel song. Fashion is mobile, so men have been saying from the moment when they themselves abandoned gorgeous raiment for the utilitarian monotony of today. But men have been as concerned about putting their best foot forward as have women, for many fashions are the result of some physical deficiency. Okay. Modern men's close-cut hair is the result of Francis I having to have his lovely locks shorn because of a wound received in a tournament. Charles II of France had misshapen legs, hence the long-tailed coat. Misshapen legs. Many years ago, an Englishman had his foot crushed, so he had to wear wide-toed shoes. These were soon exaggerated until the width had to be regulated by court decree. The follow-the-leader instinct is strong in all human beings, and men are wont to make all manner of fun of women because of this herd-like compliancy. But men have the same instinct. That's right, Carrie, they do. The same desire to wear weird things. If you doubt it, watch sober-faced citizens parading in lodge uniforms. Got Shriner's little fez. Men's fashion instinct has become repressed, but only because of the necessity of adapting their garments to the peculiar working conditions of civilization. At heart, they are all dandies. Well, say that to the man in the brew-through t-shirt with the sleeves cut off and a pair of dirty cargo pants. In the days when women rendered homage to the trim figures and shapely legs of men, the well-rounded limbs which promenaded in all occasions, receiving many oohs and ahs from a rapturous gallery, were encased in the counterpart of the silk stockings which are now being worn on the other foot, the woman's. Elegance in masculine apparel should never be a subject of disparaging comment, for does not nature herself set the example and prink her male birds and beasts in gorgeous array? Pride of person pays, and dudes and dandies, or whatever is today the equivalent of the smart swaggerer, should see to it that women do not monopolize it. Women have the advantage in that vanity is supposed to be their prerogative, and men must appear disdainful of perfection even while being most particular about their personal appearance. The uniforms of the officers of the United States Army are the epitome of all that is meant by neatness and perfection of detail. The immaculateness of the well-dressed man is an asset in business, a stimulant to self-respect, and a constant challenge to female supremacy. From time to time, because of that Mad Hatter fashion, sumptuary laws have been passed by various rulers, regulating the dress of both men and women. Caesar and Augustus interfered with the using of various shades of purple by the women of Rome, and they issued edicts concerning it. Nero, who never minded matters of state, forbade the wearing of purple garments by anyone but himself, the purple toga and robe being deemed the exclusive insignia of the emperor. Now, if we remember why, purple came from those little marine snails, and they basically almost extincted those, making purple garments. So it makes sense that you got a sumptuary law, so there's enough purple for the people who really deserve it, the rich, the high-powered, to the point of almost, again, extincting those little snails. And then Nero had it all to himself. As a matter of class distinction, it is interesting to note that an old Act of Parliament detailed the kinds of clothes to be worn by grooms and other servants of English lords. This is another thing that if you, and I don't know that I've actually read any of it here. It might be in something that I was just reading for my own research, but enslaved people at times kind of had this rebellion against the types of clothing that they had to wear, whether it was just like the garbage weave. I think they would call them Lowells. It was just like really sort of badly processed wool and linsey woolsey, like very scratchy, sort of garbage fabric. So they were forced to wear those things. But when you had people of like the really wealthy that had, grooms and, carriagemen and that kind of thing, maybe even in the house, servants that might wear livery in the house, those were very sort of ostentatious costumes sometimes. And then they became very outdated. And so you had enslaved people that had been forced to wear these like essentially costumes. And particularly in the United States, after emancipation, you kind of had this like, I mean, there weren't sumptuary laws here, but you kind of had this like, thou shalt not wear the finery that the white folks wear. Like there was that kind of thing. So you had a lot of this like, I want to say rebellion in one way, and also like in the Black communities kind of putting their arms around unique ways of dressing, and kind of pulling some of that like that bright colored finery, but also like, we're going to put things together in ways that make sense to us. So it's kind of interesting. And I'm trying to think, I'm really drawing a blank where I read this. I do know, the woman, Shani McKnight, is, I think she lives in Brooklyn, and she is a fantastic historian, doing, like the unsung histories of Black people from enslavement to emancipation and so on. And she's done a whole lot of really interesting like podcasts and videos. You can find her on YouTube. So anyway, I'm digressing here, but just thinking about, the livery and servants of the ultra wealthy and how clothing, how they had to deal with clothing. So, okay. So kinds of clothes to be worn by grooms and other servants of English lords. The cloth must not cost more than 2 marks for the entire suit, and their wives and children are to wear no veil or kerchief passing 12 pence a veil. But religious influences seem to have more effect in modifying the dress of people than any interference of the lawmakers. But that's interesting, that it's religion more than law. And that surprises me. I mean, you think before Henry VIII, but post Henry VIII, let me finish reading. So Calvin and various other reformers had exerted some influence in persuading their followers to wear sober clothing. So we're getting into those Puritans. The last of the sumptuary laws passed during the 13th year of Queen Elizabeth's reign, requiring everyone above 6 years of age, except ladies' peers and those who had 20 marks a year out of the land, or had filled certain offices, to wear upon the Sabbath and holy days 1 cap of wool knit, thickened or dressed in England. So, unless you were a child under the age of 6, or you were a lady or peer, or had money, so a peer of the court, meaning dukes, duchesses, counts, viscounts, all that stuff, or someone who had 20 marks a year off the land, so that's landed gentry. Everybody else had to wear a wool hat. Had to cover their head on Sabbath and holy days. Wow. If they were not wearing that wool cap, thickened or dressed in England, they would be fined 3 shillings 4 pence a day. This act of the Queen repealed in the 39th year of her reign. Since then, people have had no interference by law, but Napoleon, His Holiness Pius XI, Mussolini, and Herr Hitler. Now, this is 1938 or 1936. I think she wrote this in 36. So Herr Hitler, to say nothing of lesser mortals clothed with a little temporary authority, have tried at various times to regulate women's dress. To say that they should or should not wear, all to no effect. Dame Fashion still rules, and her votaries still bow to her edicts. Now, this is interesting. Of all the horrible things that the Nazi Party did, I mean, I guess I kind of just in my mind, I thought like, it's not so much that they had like fashion edicts, but just that like they shut fashion houses down. You know, I mean, by bombing countries like France. But it seems that she's saying Mussolini and Hitler tried at various times to regulate women's dress. That's interesting. I have no desire to do Nazi research, but if anybody knows, you know, what they tried to do, you know, I'm wondering if what she's saying is like where they required the armbands, with the, you know, the, Star of David on them, you know, that I think it's a Juden or something like that. Interesting. Okay. Well, but that's not women's fashion. That's everybody had to wear that, so I don't know. Okay. It is interesting to note that in 1836, just 100 years ago, see, she was writing this in 1936. Just 100 years ago, Charles Butler Esquire wrote a book entitled The American Lady. In a chapter devoted to the propensity to imitation in dress, he said, "The variations of dress, as in countries highly polished, frequently variations will exist." Let's see. The variations of dress, as in countries highly polished, frequently variations will exist, fall within the jurisdiction of imitation. And so long as the prevailing modes remain actually indifferent, that is to say, so long as in their form they are not tinctured with indelicacy, nor in their costliness are inconsistent with the station or the fortune of the wearer, such a degree of conformity to them, as is sufficient to preclude the appearance of particularity, is reasonable and becoming. Okay, I think this is basically saying, as long as you're not being immodest, and as long as you're wearing clothing that is not above your station in life, it is fine. Okay, I think that's kind of what Carrie Hall has also said. It is modesty to acquiesce in the decision of others on a subject upon which they have at least as good a title as ourselves to decide, and upon which they have not decided amiss. When other unobjectionable modes are generally established, the same reasoning indicates the propriety of acceding to them. But it neither suggests nor justifies the practice of adopting fashions which entrench either on the principles of decency or on the rules of reasonable frugality. Fashions of the former kind are not infrequently introduced by the shameless, of the latter by the profuse, and both are copied by the vain and inconsiderate. Do you find it inconsiderate of me to wear fashionable clothing? But deliberately to copy either is to show that delicacy, the chief grace of the female character, or that economy, the support not merely of honesty but of generosity, is deemed an object only of secondary importance. To copy either inadvertently denotes a want of habitual liveliness of attention to the native dictates of sensibility, or to the suggestions of equity or kindness. Okay. Who is this guy again? Charles Butler, 1836, The American Lady. Okay. She goes on to quote him, looks like for the rest of this chapter. Fashions in dress, which in the two particulars already specified are irreprehensible, are yet sometimes of such a nature as to be extremely inconvenient to the wearer. Modes of this description may seldom be likely to be very long prevalent, but while they continue, every practicable discouragement should be pointed against them, and similar care should be employed to discountenance all such methods of decorating the person as involve in their operations the surrender of any considerable portion of time. So you should also be able to clothe yourself quickly. In the next place, it is to be observed that the principles which recommend such a degree of compliance with established fashions of an objectionable nature, as is sufficient to prevent the appearance of particularity. Where is he going with particularity? Cannot be alleged in defense of persons who are solicitous to pursue existing modes within their minute ramifications, or who seek to distinguish themselves as the introducers or early followers of new modes. Fickleness, or vanity, or ambition is the motive which encourages such desires. Desires which afford presumptive evidence of feebleness of intellect, though found occasionally to accentuate and degrade superior minds. So it's really just a bunch of dummies that are into this, right? But sometimes smart people are infected with this fickleness and vanity. It happens in the embellishment of the person, as in most other instances, the wayward caprice and a passion for admiration deviate into those paths of folly which lead from objects which should be pursued. We have run through every change that fancy at the loom, exhausted has had genius to supply, and studious of mutation still discard, a real elegance a little used for monstrous novelty and strange disguise. This is another random little poem that I don't know if this is this man. She sprinkles these forever throughout this book. So this might be Charles Butler. I don't know. Okay, she goes on, still quoting Butler. So pretentious, preposterous, and fantastic are the disguises of the human form which modern fashion has exhibited, that her votaries, when brought together in her public haunts, have sometimes been found scarcely able to refrain from gazing with an eye of ridicule and contempt each on the other. And while individually priding themselves on their elegance and taste, they have very commonly appeared in the eyes of an indifferent spectator to be running a race for the acquisition of deformity. Thus it may be seen that men have always been solicitous concerning women's fashions, and have made them a subject of much apprehension. Inasmuch as fashions are largely man-made, this continual distress would imply an admission on their part of their inability to meet and govern the situation. Or is it entirely due to the insubordination of womankind? During the past 50 years, the masterminds in the field of fashion creation have used their influence to build up a defense against absurd and indecent fashions, but all to little avail. If more than a few individual minds have been touched, no evidence remains either in the dress of the times or in the inherited practices of our own generation, if judged by the results seen everywhere. Here again, art, sentiment, and morals give way to vanity, frivolity, and fashion. The claims of nature in matters relating to human elegance are particularly charming, so long as the accessories and surroundings are in unison. But in human hearts everywhere dwells an innate love of adornment, and there seems to be very little difference between the untaught savages in their efforts to adorn themselves and the belles of highly civilized communities. Oh, how rude. How very rude. And you guys know, I'm a more is more kind of person. Maybe not on my person, but in general, I think more is more. And I think it's rude of her to say that. Untaught savages. I mean, come on, Carrie Hall. The one looks to nature for assistance in displaying her charms. The other looks to Dame Fashion and flaunts all the extremes she sees fit to foist upon an unresisting public. Elizabeth Robbins Pennell, writing in the North American Review, says, "In my time, I have worn hoops and bustles, sleeves wide as wings, and hats like flower gardens. I have dragged long skirts through the dust and mud, and endured the agony of walking in tight skirts." The hobble skirt, right? "I have appeared in basques, boleros, blouses, and shirtwaists. I have exposed my neck in rounds and V's and squares. I have been gored, ruffled, pleated, and I have been tucked, scalloped, and fringed. Never before have I failed to conform with the docility of my sex, and sometimes, at great inconvenience, to the dressmaker's law that women must not show themselves this year in what last year was the height of good form. At last, however, I have rebelled, and if anything could reconcile me to old age, it is the reason it gives for my unbobbed hair and the unfashionable length of my gown. Shakespeare said, "All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players." We all play a part in everyday life, and as every actor is carefully dressed for the particular part he is to play, so should we be dressed and appropriately and becomingly for everything we do, that we may make a picture that is pleasing to all who come in contact with us. It is an old adage, but one that will outlast time, that what is worth doing at all is worth doing well. Dress, therefore, being indispensable, is incumbent on all to dress as well as they can, to render their costumes as becoming to themselves as possible, consistently with due regard to climate, convenience, and social position, remembering Polonius's advice to Laertes as he was about to embark upon a journey to France. Costly thy habit as thy purse can buy, but not expressed in fancy rich, not gaudy. For the apparel oft proclaims the man, and they in France of the best rank and station are of a most select and generous chief in that. In discussing the art of dress, the late Arnold Benedict, noted English author, said, "To my mind, the art of dressing well is the most influential of all the arts, and is capable of giving more pleasure to the community at large than all the other arts combined." Oh, that's interesting. It has professors worthy of rank with the foremost painters, musicians, poets, and architects. A well-dressed woman is giving pleasure all the time. She is exercising a civilizing and a humane influence, and everybody who sees her is consciously or unconsciously uplifted. It is the finest and most powerful application of the poetic principle to daily ordinary life. In a word, every well-dressed woman is a public benefactor. Okay. Human nature has changed less than the fashions in the last 100 years, and notwithstanding the advancement of ideas in this 20th century, woman remains fundamentally the same, as easily influenced by her caprices and inconsistencies as in the beginning, when she practically had the Garden of Eden to herself, and only one man to subjugate. Okay. Tomorrow, the fashions of today will be the fashions of yesterday. So perpetual is the inconstancy of la mode. Fashion is never short of inventions, of prodigies, of follies. She seems to avenge herself on the moderns, because the ancients gave her no divine honors, nor placed her upon the summit of their Olympus. If a collection could be made of all the articles that were for an hour a woman's delight, and put into a museum dedicated to Dame Fashion, it would be as great as the universe. Before these ornaments of women, fickle love would ever dance a frenzied round. Not only has the original type of dress changed, but its subordinate parts have undergone continual alteration. They will continue to change, giving future historians ample opportunity to study this fascinating subject, if they desire to give fashion its rightful place in the picture of the manners and customs of the world. It is quite impossible to prophesy the realms that modern woman may yet attempt to enter and conquer. Yeah, indeed. Or to estimate the number and kind of garlands with which she will decorate her triumphal car in her unswerving progress through the ages yet to come. It is not the purpose of this book to anticipate the surprises Dame Fashion may have in store for future generations, but it is safe to assume that the feminine world of fashion will not remain stagnant for lack of ideas or initiative. And she ends with, "So much I wonder still to see, that not so much amazeth me. Stephen Gosson, 1595. And that is the end of From Hoopskirts to Nudity. I feel like we have been reading this book for an eternity. I think we kind of have. So it's interesting, the bibliography she gives. It's not really huge, but she pulled a lot of stuff from the 1800s, which makes sense because, I mean, she was covering the 1800s. But she lists all of the American magazines here in one section, the foreign publications, and then all the books. So there's a couple of names on the book. So Oscar Wilde, Decorative Art in America. Mary Brooks Pickens, The Secrets of Distinctive Dress. Mary Brooks Picken was, she ran a school in Pennsylvania. And it was basically like, I think she ran it as both a correspondence course and like a school, but it was basically like sewing and other kind of homemaking type stuff. I found, if it was last year or before last, an entire, like a complete set of the correspondence books in an antique store. And I thought about buying them and I didn't. And that's one of those things that I kind of wish I had. So yeah, let's see if any of the other names here. Ruth Finley, the Lady of Godey's. She used that as one of her. I don't see all the other ones are people I don't recognize. So it has felt like a really long book, yes, because some of these chapters were so long, and we ended up splitting them up, and then of course all of my crazy travel. So like I said, I don't have another book to go to yet. I'm gonna go through my books. I could think of one or two that maybe I'll take a look at. The one I'm thinking of is not terribly long, and I'm not sure how interesting it will be. So I'll have to see. I don't think I will have another book by Thursday, so I will have to figure out what we're going to do on Thursday. But yeah, this week I'll do some research. I'll see if there's something that, yeah. Yes, her discussions about her attitudes toward different things. Yeah, I mean, Carrie Hall was, I think I was a little bit surprised after, reading her and Rose Kretzinger's book, the actual quilt book. I kind of thought of her as sort of being this sort of mild-mannered person, and, the things that I knew she was into, like she had this doll collection and things like that, and I just kind of thought of her as this sort of mild-mannered person, but she clearly had some opinions. Yeah, so very interesting. And I still love this picture in the front. It's like a woman in this very ancient dress, a naked woman, and they're sitting on a seesaw of this hourglass. Very strange. And I'm pretty sure I told you guys, I know this. This was my book came from the Western Costume Company of Los Angeles, from their research division. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I guess they probably used the pictures in here as reference pictures. So, well, we could put that one on the shelf. Yeah, I want to find somebody else that has some interesting attitudes about things. So I'm going to have to look and see what I can get my hands on. So with that, I am going to say adieu a little bit early today. Tomorrow is Quilt Nerding will be off. We do have a recording that we will have available if you want to tune in. It's going to drop at 2 p.m. tomorrow, and it'll be on the videos tab and not on the live stream tab. And that's because Jill is out of town on vacation at a retreat. And she sent me a picture from her workstation, the table she, I guess, is sitting at the retreat. And her view is really, really beautiful. I think she's in Vermont. I believe it's Vermont, and she's just got this really pretty mountainous view. So look forward to hearing from her when she comes back. But in the meantime, it is just me this week. So you'll get that video if you want to watch. It is Dana's auctions, her last auction. We looked at some of the quilts and the goodies. So that's what our recording is about. And I think that's pretty much everything. Otherwise, it's a normal week. So I hope you guys have a fantastic week, and I hope to see you on Thursday. Yeah, so stay cool if it's getting hot where you are. I hope you have plenty of time this week to relax and maybe get a little sewing done in between, the work week priorities. And I will see you on Thursday. So take care, guys. Mwah, mwah. Bye.